moving from being a tactical individual contributor to becoming a strategic UX leader. So if you've spent any time interviewing recently, really good hiring managers, and I will qualify hiring managers, because not all of them are good at hiring, which is a whole nother talk for a whole nother session. But the ones who are good at hiring are looking for something called achiever pattern. Achiever pattern is what shows that every year of your career, you have grown in the work that you do. Your projects have gotten bigger, the work has more impact, you've taken on more responsibility, you're interfacing with more senior people within the organization, you're influencing more extensive changes across the organization in what's delivered. These are things that show that you're there, right? Someone who doesn't have achiever pattern basically works on the same types of projects over and over and over again. They don't have any more responsibility. They do the same work. And this is how, what you should be looking for instead of years of experience, right? When people are hiring, they often put into jobs that you must have 3+ years of experience or 5+ years of experience. That's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. What you really want is you want an achiever pattern. You want that growth year over year. There are people who do the same projects every year, and they basically have 1 year of experience, and they just keep repeating it over and over and over again for 10 years. That's not 10 years of experience. 10 years of experience is every year you've gotten better, you've grown in your work, your projects get bigger, you take on more responsibility, you have more access across the organization, the changes you make are more extensive. So this is what we're talking about here, right? This idea of growth. And in order to understand growth, we must understand that everybody starts basically as an individual contributor, right? And you sit at your desk as an individual contributor, and basically, there's your laptop, and you're sitting there and you're working at your laptop, and there's a whole bunch of other people who are working at their desks in the organization, and for the most part, you're not really interacting with these people, right? You've got people who you have to deal with every day because they're part of your projects, but most of the people in the organization are not part of your project work. And so, when you're an individual contributor, you're basically just handed an assignment to work on, and you basically work your way through that assignment, and then you turn it in, and you get a new assignment. And that's individual contributor work, right? It's basically this sort of assignment-based stuff. And when people start in their job, the assignments are small, and then they grow in size, and they keep growing. And as they're growing, that's growth to their achiever pattern. You're seeing more and more growth as time goes on. However, the thing about this work is it's fairly isolated, right? You might have one other person that you work with, but that's about it, right? There's just a handful of people that are part of your project, and you work with them. You might work with them extensively, but you do your thing, you finish it, they do their thing. It's in a lot of organizations, it falls into a factory model where you're handing things off to the next person, who then works on it for a little bit and hands it off to the next person and works on it for a little bit. And this is interesting at first, but it gets old pretty quickly. And if you don't have any growth, if you're not actually getting bigger work, if you're not getting more responsibility, you get sort of stuck in this position. And the other thing about it is it all depends on stuff being handed down to you to get work done, right? So you're always sort of reacting to the work that's there. You're not getting a chance to think about doing work that's broader across the organization. You don't really get a chance to think about what's coming down in the future. It's very much this reactive approach to everything that you do. And again, at first this is fine, but if you don't have a path to grow bigger and better projects, you start to get stale. It can feel very limiting. It can feel very restrictive. It's almost like you bump into a organizational ceiling that prevents you from growing any bigger, because when you're in sort of a reactive assignment driven thing, the assignments can only be so large, right? And people get stuck there. And that's a problem for a lot of folks. So there are a lot of people right now across the UX industry is not the right term, but the UX world, there are a lot of UX professionals that feel very stuck in their jobs, and they're not getting the opportunity to do anything bigger than what they've gotten. They've sort of achieved the biggest they can get as an individual contributor in their organization. So if we think about this sort of in an org chart fashion, you've got an organization chart. So there's, somebody at the top, and they have under them VPs or direct, chief product officers, and then under them there might be some sort of notion of a director, and a director is a manager of managers. So there's other middle managers. Some of them might have managers under them of sorts, but at some point you've got some ICs, right? So now you've got an army of ICs that report to a manager, and here you are at the bottom of my org chart, right? And that's how this works, right? Is there's the people who do the work, who do the projects, who contribute to this stuff. Those are the individual contributors. And in a lot of organizations, the sort of natural next step is to go from individual contributor, I'm going to use another color, individual contributor up to manager, right? So now you have to go into management. And for some people, management is an appealing next step. There's a lot of good things to be said about being a manager. Managers, however, do very different work from individual contributors. They're no longer contributing to the substance of the project work. They contribute by managing their individual contributors, right? So their job is to make sure that the individual contributors are all being as effective as possible, right? Effective means that the individual contributors know what's expected of them. They have the materials and tools to do their best work every day. They know how their work fits into the organization's mission. They get opportunities to grow and learn. That's what a good manager does. And it's a very rewarding career for those people who like to be managers, who want to be managers, but it's not for everybody, because not everybody wants to give up their contribution to the project work. And their contribution to the project work is what made the job fun for them. And when you become a manager, you've basically got to give the individual contributors under you some sort of autonomy so that they can make their own contributions to the work. They can make their own decisions. Otherwise, you'll be accused of micromanaging, which isn't a thing, but that's the phenomena that you see. And as a result, you lose your effectiveness. If you're really effective, you let people make their decisions to do their best work on their own, and as a result, you're removed. You're once removed from that work. And of course, as you move up the tree, you become more and more removed from that work. And again, some people thrive at these upper levels, but a lot of people struggle with them. So it's not the path that everybody wants to go up. But then if you're an individual contributor and you don't want to become a manager, you sort of get stuck. And that's why we need to sort of think about this as not the only option. And it's not. There's another option, which is to become a leader. Now, leadership and management are terms that people use interchangeably. They often refer to their managers as their leaders. They often refer to the executives as leadership. And so this makes everything more confusing. But the actual things that a manager does and the actual things that a leader does are night and day different. And not all managers need to be leaders, and not all leaders need to be managers. You do not need to be a manager to become a leader. And so I want to take a moment and sort of talk about this distinction because it's really important. Basically, the idea is that managers, that's an M, managers. Managers are, what makes a manager is that managers have direct reports, right? There are people who report to the manager, and they have to be appointed by the organization. Right? You cannot become a manager until somebody makes you a manager, right? That whole thing about, I'm not, you're not the boss of me. And it's like, actually, they just made me the boss of you. And they're like, oh, okay. That's how it works, right? You get appointed by the manager, or by the organization. Now you have this specific job of managing the individual. And as I mentioned, managers focus on effectiveness. So if they're really good at what they do, they make sure that their team is as effective as possible. But that's different than being a leader. Leaders are not do not have direct reports. Leaders have followers. And somebody becomes a leader not because they're appointed by the organization, but because they have a follower. The moment you have a follower, you become a leader. That's just how that works. And leaders gain followers by having a compelling vision that people get excited about, a vision of a better future. And so this is very different, right? Because you can get anybody across the organization to be a follower, and they're excited because you're promoting this better vision of the future. And that's what gets people really excited. And so the focus for leaders is on basically making that vision a reality, promoting and making the vision a reality. That's the idea. So we have direct relationships. Now, it's possible that someone is a manager and a leader at the same time, right? They'd be a manager because they spend their time making sure their team's effective, while at the same time, they're spending a lot of time promoting a vision of what things could be. And they focus on making that vision a reality. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, you see in a lot of organizations, a complete distinction between manager and leader, even at the highest levels. You've seen this with CEO and COO organizations, right? Because sometimes there's a CEO at the top, but then there's this intermediate person who's a COO or a chief of staff. And the chief of staff's job or the COO's job is to make sure the organization is executing the vision of the CEO. So the COO is the manager per se in this setting, and the CEO is the person with the vision. They're the leader. When Steve Jobs was alive, he was definitely the CEO. Tim Cook was the COO. And Steve was, by all reports, Steve's was a miserable manager to work for. You did not want to work for Steve Jobs. It was part of standard Apple training at Apple headquarters that if you got in an elevator, if you were standing at the elevator and Steve Jobs walked up, or the elevator opened and Steve Jobs was in it, you were not to get on that elevator with Steve Jobs, because if you got on that elevator with Steve Jobs, it was very likely that would be your last day working at Apple, right? So people did not really enjoy working for the man as a manager. But as a leader, he had a vision for where Apple was going, and people would follow him to the edges of the earth for that. And Tim Cook was the one who, at the time, just made everything happen. He was the guy who was a great manager, and people love working for Tim Cook. They still do. And now he's got this dual role of being manager and leader, and he's doing what seems to be a fine job, but it's a different approach than what was there during the Steve Jobs day. When I joined the White House, Dennis McDonough was the chief of staff, and he was our boss, and he was there to make sure that we had everything we need to get our job done. But the vision was being set by President Obama, and President Obama, whatever he said, that was our thing, right? We were right behind them. And so again, this change between being the leader and the manager, they do not have to be the same person. And so the big difference between them is that a manager has what's known as role power, right? Role power is, the way to think about role power is that role power is like a neon sign that a manager wears on their head. And that neon sign says, I can get you fired. At least in the US, probably not in the Scandinavian countries, but most of the rest of the world, that's what the neon sign says. It also says, I can get you promoted, I can get you a raise, I can get you on the great projects, I can get you on the crappy projects. There's a lot of power that is just given to you the moment you're appointed by the organization. And everybody who's a direct report of a manager sees that neon sign and sees that thing. If the manager says, I want you to work on this, you say, okay, I guess I'm going to work on that, whether you care about it or not. But a leader doesn't have role power. There is no neon sign for a leader. Their power comes from inspiration. Their power is that they inspire people to take on the vision, to actually want to be a part of it. And the thing is that role power has a very short half-life. As soon as the person leaves the room, the role power dissipates. But inspiration power sticks around forever, because people are really bought into that different future, that different path. And that's what makes leaders so compelling. Now, in middle management, you tend to have to really do either have a leader or use your role power to extend the power of someone who's a leader. And so there's a bunch of dynamics that happen here, but the role power can be used. You can assign role power to somebody else. So for example, an example of this is think about an idea like building a design system. And the thing is that rarely the design system comes from the CEO, right? The CEO doesn't say, you know what we need? We need a design system. And the chief product officer says, yeah, we need a design system. And the director says, okay, we're going to build a design system. And the manager says, we're going to build a design system, right? That's not what happens. What happens is some individual contributor says, this work would be so much better if we had a design system. So they start selling this idea of a design system. At first, nobody's interested, but over time, somebody starts saying, yeah, I think we should have a design system. And then they go up and they get someone excited in their management and says, yeah, okay. And then their manager helps them get the director excited about this. And the director says, okay, let's build the design system. And now when the director says, let's build a design system, they have that neon sign on their forehead and it gives the role power. And so now these people are like, I guess we're building a design system. And I guess we're building a design system. So the whole system propagates because they were won over. And this mechanism of leading versus managing is what makes that happen. But the thing is that you have to have an inspirational vision. So what this means is that you need you can have an alternative to just becoming a manager. And the thing is that a leader doesn't have to stop contributing to the projects directly like a manager does. You can still do that, but you're no longer an individual contributor because you're now leading a group of people. You're basically a group contributor. You get the whole group to change the product, to improve the work, to make things better. And so you lead by having your vision move forward. And this is how this works. This is the way you become a leader, is you come up with a vision that inspires people. The thing is that people really need to understand what that vision is. And so to get there, you can think of a vision as this, right? It's an alternative future. This is today. And today, whatever it is that we're working on, it's got a bunch of problems that are basically pissing us off, right? So that's the list of problems that we would like to see solved someday. And if we go into the future at some point in the future, and our path to that future is that we do nothing different from what we're doing today, we get to a future where all those problems still exist. And because, if this is a long enough time, we've probably added a bunch more problems to it. Things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. And so this future is the future we get to if we don't do anything different. But a leader imagines a better future. The x-axis here is time. We're going to make the y-axis be just making things better. And so there's a better future. And that better future is tangibly different from the future that we're going to end up on. And in that better future, the things that are broken, well, we fix them. That's what makes it better. And so we have this alternative future that we can get on. And the only way we're going to get there is if we do something different. And so somehow we're going to do something different to get to that better future. And this difference between the better future and the future we get to have if we do nothing different, this is our vision. So we go and we sell the vision. We sell this idea that there's a better vision, there's a better future, and the way it looks that makes it different is that all these problems are solved versus the future that we're going to end up on if we don't make it different. If we can get people bought into this better future, if we can get the manager bought in and the director bought in and the CPO bought in, then we can convince people to do the hard work of whatever that something different is to get us to that better future. But otherwise, we're going to stay on this path of the future that isn't better, where everything is just as broken going forward as they are today. And so this this is what we're talking about here, right? This idea that there are two different futures, and the future that we're talking about can be anything. It can be, this is what it looks like if we have a design system versus not working with a design system. It can be, this is what it would look like if we had better research. This is not having better research, and we're still guessing. This is what it would look like if we had a different visual look and feel, or a different interaction model, or, if we merged our product with another company's product, right? These are the changes that we're trying to sell. And we put together a vision and we get people excited about that, and we influence the change over time. And that's what leaders do, is they create that alternative future, that different future, and they figure out how to tell the story of that different future in such a way that it really gets people excited about that vision, so excited that they want to be a part of it, and they start taking on the work to help do it. And that's what a leader does. A leader really influences people, wins people over in this way. Now, one of the things about being a leader is that you can't just be a manager and make sure that your directs are effective. You have to win over your peers. You have to win over other individual contributors. You have to win over your manager. You have to win over a manager of another group so that they can lend their influence down, right? This whole idea of taking their role power. Where's my purple pen? Oh, I've lost my, oh, there it is. The idea of using their role power to influence the people under them, well, that's got a name, or at least the name that we use at the White House is air cover, right? You get air cover from a manager who basically says, I'm going to use my role power, which has a short half-life, to say, you should go listen to Oscar's idea because Oscar's idea is amazing, and now everyone has to listen to Oscar's idea. But the thing is that air cover only works if Oscar's idea ends up influencing the people that work for that manager. If Oscar's idea doesn't end up influencing the people who they're not going to go and do it. They're not followers. So you get this chance to actually work on making this happen. And the thing is that once people understand this, you can go off and have all sorts of great influence across the organization. You just have to, find a vision that gets them really excited. It doesn't even have to be your vision. It can be somebody else's vision, but you are giving your influence and your storytelling capabilities to make that vision a reality. I mean, ideally you give them attribution, but the key thing here is that you're helping lead this, right? The vision doesn't have to be your idea, but it has to be a great idea. And the thing about being a leader is that you now have to influence in all directions. You have to influence, all the people who might be below you, all the people who work as your peers, and all the people above you. And the more influence, in order to grow, the more you'll see the vision start to become a reality, and you'll see folks actually doing the different work that has to get done in order for that vision to become a reality. And so this is all about relationship building. So this idea of creating a vision and telling the stories and working the relationships, these are all new skills. These are not the skills that you needed to be a great individual contributor. If you're an individual contributor and you're sort of bumping up against that contribution ceiling, the skills that got you here will not get you beyond the ceiling. So you need to find the skills to actually move beyond this. And you have to grow those skills. They don't come naturally. You have to learn what they are. They involve all sorts of things like everything from active listening and knowing how to pre-wire your ideas and how to tell the story of the vision and to promote it, how to establish a focus on outcomes. You have to understand the politics of the organization. You have to be, in order to be strategic, you have to know what's happening across the organization. Individual contributor work is very reactive. It's very tactical, whereas being a leader, you are forced to being more strategic. You can't be a leader and work tactically for very long. You won't get very far. So you have to understand the thing that differentiates leadership is leadership is very much about defining that path of what you're going to do differently, understanding what the plan is that will get you on the baby steps, the first baby step, the second baby step, the third baby step, what will get you here instead of the path of doing nothing different. That's what being strategic is. And in order to be strategic, you really needed to sort of be in this place where you are paying attention to what's happening across the organization. The thing about strategy is you have to be very situationally aware, and the key thing is that that awareness is not a set of skills that you develop when you're working very tactically, isolated on your own individual contributor work. So this idea of being compelling with your vision, understanding how to attract followers, how to communicate it, how to adapt the vision to the priorities of stakeholders so that they get bought into it, being able to use the metrics and the research in a more strategic way. These are all learned skills. And so that's the key thing here. If you want to be an influential leader in your organization, you're going to have to pick up these skills. But it's all something you can learn. It is something, because we are teaching it all the time. And so it's something that you really want to look into if you're feeling like you need to move beyond the bubble of being an isolated individual contributor. And then you can take that credit for leading, and that becomes part of your achiever pattern. That becomes the process of moving forward. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, right? This idea that the leadership is a learned set of skills. It grows past the barrier of being that isolated individual contributor. It allows you to still have influence across the organization and be contributing to the products, the services, the way the organization works every day. However, it is not natural, and it is not the skills that got you to be a great individual contributor. So you're going to have to learn something different. And that's what we wanted to talk about here. Jared here. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you'll get more videos like this. If you have any comments, questions, or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, consider joining our Leaders of Awesomeness community. It's completely free, home to over 50,000 UX leaders who regularly share questions, ideas, inspiration about their experiences. The link is in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.